GM fam, it's Friday, August 2nd, the first day of the rest of our lives, the latter half of the year, but it's going to be a fantastic day because we are joined for this Llama Party by Drake Evans, formerly of Frax Finance. He's since moved on to Agora Finance, which is also a stablecoin heavyweight. So we're going to have a lot of fun stuff to talk about, like what happened with Frax, what's going on with Agora. Before we get going, we want to thank our sponsors at YieldNest. That's right, Leviathan has hit the big times. We've finally got a sponsor. And you know, when you're like the #1 news service in crypto, you get a lot of offers, right? Like you have people like SBF being like, "Hey, we want to sponsor you." So we were super excited that we could be like, nah, we're only going to work with the best, which is YieldNest restaking solution. Strongly recommend you check it out. They are frequently guests around here at Leviathan. But enough puffery. Let's get into Agora. Drake, how are you doing today?
Doing great. Really excited to be here.
I gotta say, I like your background. I feel like I've seen a few other guests with a similar background. Is that the?
Yeah, I actually am in like an office right now, but it's pretty boring background. There's a little whiteboard behind me, but this is the best. I like this virtual background a little better. So.
Oh, nice. That means that if there's any like fuzzing artifacts or whatever, like the green screen pops off for a second, people are going to get all the Agora alpha. So stay tuned to the background there.
Unfortunately, the whiteboard is blank right now. So.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And of course, we're joined by DeFi advisor Sur. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, sir. Nice to be on Llama Party as always. Everyone's favorite show usually, and nice to be on with Drake for the first time. Really excited to learn about Agora and some other stuff.
Yeah, so Drake, let's take it back to like the way beginning, before even Frax. Like, how did you get into crypto?
So I got into crypto. Let's see. I was on a road trip. Well, actually, even before that, in 2012, I was studying economics. It was sort of this quantitative easing era, and I came across Bitcoin. And sort of immediately, I was in this framework of kind of like a central bank hedge. So I saw value. It looked cool. Didn't think about it again for a few years. A few years later, I guess it was 2016, kind of like leading into that bull market. I took a trip to Niagara Falls and ended up listening to a Bitcoin podcast. So bought Bitcoin all that summer. I thought I was an excellent trader, of course, and eventually actually got into mining Ether. So in 2016, 2017, I was bribing the Best Buy employees to tell me when there were new GPUs in stock. And so that was 2016. But honestly, at that point, I wasn't really shilled on ETH yet. I was sort of very much in this kind of central bank currency type of a model and didn't really understand how Ethereum would be useful. But I do love building things, especially sort of in real life. And so the opportunity to build a mining rig, I couldn't pass up. That was when ETH was 250. It had just 10x'd. And I remember because one GPU was about 250 to 300. And so my break even was essentially 1 ETH. And then I actually left my job in finance at that time. I originally was working in a small boutique private equity shop. I left to do basically software full time. So I sold my Bitcoin because I had already made some money, and I thought there's no way I could go higher. And went into software, where I ended up meeting Dennis and Bertram, who you may know as the founder of Tally. And we became very good friends. And sort of the whole time, he was basically telling me, you need to come back to Ethereum. We need good builders. This is the real thing. Like it's different than cryptocurrency, right? It's like this new ecosystem, and it's going to be big. Took me a while to be convinced, and actually it was, I guess, the winter of 2019 when Dennison came to me and said, "Hey, listen, I did like a proof of concept on YouTube of this like no-code blockchain tool. Some VCs reached out and want to fund it, and like basically come help me build it." So that's when I sort of got back into crypto for real. We basically coded nonstop for 3 months after work. Launched at ETH Denver in 2020. We did like the whole ETH London ETHCC, but then COVID hit. Kind of the whole world stopped for a second. Anyway, Dennison went on to start Tally, which is very successful today. I went back to ADP, where I had been working as like a performance and scaling team lead, but I knew I wanted to get back into crypto. And so was waiting for, and by this time, like DeFi summer had happened in the middle. We were kind of in a pretty big bull market, and I thought, well, I'll wait until the end of the bull. I've seen this story before I jump back in. Anyway, it didn't seem like it was letting up, so I quit my job at ADP, went to Frax, and I've been there ever since. Then I had an opportunity to do Agora, and there's a whole story behind that too, which I can go in as well. But that's sort of how I got into crypto.
Excellent. I have a theory that like crypto finds you when you're ready. So the fact that crypto found you over a decade ago at this point, like clearly foundational player in this kind of emerging blockchain story for all of us.
Yeah, it's
let's
funny
get
how the narrative has changed over the years. Dennison and I actually, before we did Dapp Hero, which is the name of that tool, we actually built kind of like a proof of concept for a news aggregating site where you could tip authors, because we used to think that microtransactions would be a thing on ETH, and obviously not quite the case, but.
Well, it's funny because there have been like a lot of attempts at it, and like I don't know if you remember Zapchain from back in like the 2014 days, which was a similar like news site with microtransactions. Fun stuff, but like there wasn't the audience way back when. But
Yeah,
like I've seen some old business models just get recycled, and then they hit just because
totally
time's right.
Totally. Yeah, I remember thinking, part of our big plan for Dapp Hero was like sign in with Ethereum, basically build the whole backend with the blockchain, right? And like obviously as DeFi summer hit, gas prices went pretty high. It didn't make sense anymore. And then it's funny because now we have all these scaling solutions, L2s, where gas is super cheap. Suddenly a lot of these applications, are viable, and like I've lived that.
So let's get into Frax real quick before we get to Agora. So you joined Frax at some point. Like, what is going on there? Like, what's the vibe at Frax? Like, tell us the whole Frax story in a nutshell.
Frax is like the I've said this, I'll say it again. Like, if you want to, build DeFi and smart contracts, there's like not a better place you could possibly be. The team is super smart, super stacked. Sam, Travis, the whole crew, like literally some of the best people I've ever worked with. I cannot say enough good things about that team. And I will say it was arguably one of the hardest decisions I made to leave. But yeah, I mean, Frax is great. I joined in 2020. So I had actually done a Solidity fellowship with what's now 0x Macro, which is like a DAO dedicated. At the time they were actually headhunters, but so I did a little fellowship with them, interviewed with Frax, LivePeer, a few other big firms, and ended up going to Frax, which was like by far the greatest decision I ever made. I was just coming off actually a proof of concept for like a NFT lending protocol. Actually, Dennison gave me the idea, and I was thinking about raising money for that. Decided that basically the market wasn't efficient enough to actually pull that off, which obviously there's some companies that have managed to do that. But anyway, that's sort of how I got into Frax, because at the time, Frax wanted to build a lending protocol. And so I interviewed with the team, talked about kind of the lending stuff, and then Sam was basically like, hey, I want you to build FraxLend. And that was it. So I spent the next few months building FraxLend, which turned out to be a great success and like, amazing opportunity. And then sort of was involved in pretty much all the smart contracts that have been developed since then. So worked a lot on like Frax Ether v2, SFrax, the whole thing.
Yeah, it also astounds me just how much Frax is able to ship. I'll see if I can find it, but someone was posting like a chart of like all the different like sectors in crypto and like who has like in what. And Frax is like right at the center because it has. So not only does it have absolutely everything, it's also launched all these like amazing killer products and managed to not get hacked. Right, like
I was just going to say that, right? I have this on my desktop, a tweet from someone who I won't name, which basically says like, imagine YOLOing 4 new protocols in a year with bad security posture and thinking you're not going to get hacked. And I took a screenshot of that and I put it on my desktop. And first of all, I will just say like Frax has an excellent security posture. And yeah, look, I mean, no one has billions of TVL. No one has the amount of new protocol and like the speed of development, and hasn't been hacked. And I think like it's a testament to, look, I mean, developing smart contracts in many ways compared to other software development is like everything is backwards, right? It's like the less code you have, the more secure you are, right? The sort of like dumber and less flexible and like, less polymorphic, et cetera, like the more secure you are. And I think it's a complete reversal of the way to think about things. And so I think that, look, the Frax team has a great mindset on this, like, and it shows. And this graph is a great example too of kind of like how Frax sits at the center of everything. And I think it's really a testament to Sam's ability to kind of see where the puck is going. There were multiple times while I was at Frax where I was like, Sam would say, "Hey, I want to do X, Y, Z," and I'm thinking like, this is a bad idea. Like, this is not our core competency. It's not like, what are we what's talking about? And like, actually, Frax was one of those things. I'll just say, and like I remember thinking and saying also, like, the culture is very open and like this is a mistake and like we should focus on our core competency, which is a dollar stablecoin. And obviously that was very wrong. And I think as Frax have been like stellar products that are super successful and are hugely important. So it's a testament to just a good engineering culture and also just good leadership.
Yeah, and it's pretty remarkable that like these products that get launched, they're not the kind of like just like lukewarm, let's dip our toe in the water, like kind of like, hey, we have some Frax ETH. Like whenever Frax enters, like it changes the game a little bit, right? Like there's significant innovation in Frax ETH.
Totally.
There's significant innovation in Fraxtal with like the Fraxtal reward points being built into the block layer. There's significant innovation in the stablecoin. Just
Absolutely.
like, yeah, what very amazing success story. So
one thing that
but you just go ahead.
Frax always say is like, we don't like fork projects, right? Like if we're going to enter a space, it's because there's something there that we need that maybe doesn't exist, or it's something innovative, right? And I think that played out across pretty much every vertical. Like, yeah, Frax ETH was different. Like the 2-token model was different, was much better, I would argue. Fraxtal with the L2, like it's not just, oh, it's another op stack chain. Like it is novel, and they're all novel. And I think, and even the AMM, like, a lot of people don't realize this, but FraxSwap was the first TWAM implementation to go live. And like, that didn't exist before. And it was something that was like hugely useful to the protocol. And so, yeah, I think there is very much a culture of like, when we enter a space, it's to make a change and to do something novel, not just, fork something and so we can check a box.
Yeah. And I got my Fraxtal t-shirt from the Fraxtal in Time event recently.
Oh, nice. I have that same one.
But your particular focus was FraxLend, which is like it still like stands out as like one of the top lending protocols in the market. Like you said, it's like one of Frax's like killer apps. Like what did you learn doing FraxLend?
A lot. So I think the first was a testament in kind of like how to there's a lot of things, right? So like dealing with the pressure of like immutable smart contracts and people's money is quite I would say is a skill in itself. I remember kind of having like serious nerves before the first deployment and kind of freaking out, like wanting to reread the code, get more audits. And so I think that was like a big learning for me, is like, how do you think about security and your process in such a way that like you can sleep at night, basically. And I think there was a lot of good learnings there. I also learned a little bit about just market inefficiencies to a certain extent. I think like when we originally launched FraxLend, we thought, okay, everything will be immutable, and sort of customers can sort of arb across borrowing markets to find the best rates. And we had this like PID controller for the interest rates and all this cool stuff. And the truth is, like, users probably just actually want something a little bit more streamlined. There is truth to this kind of like overwhelming with choices. And so I think that was a big learning too, that the market's just not as efficient as you might think it is. I think it's really easy for people to get stuck in this kind of elegant solution kind of mindset, right? Where without just accepting the realities of what the market is actually telling you, right? And so you even see this today where there's a whole bunch of interest rate arbitrage available. It just doesn't ever get closed. So I think that was a big piece.
Why is that?
I think that I have a few theories. I don't know the truth, but I think a lot of the capital on chain is a very different like population than what you see in, call it, TradFi markets, right? And also it's just way smaller, right? So those two things together, you have people who are maybe less sophisticated. They're not funds who are looking at everything every day and squeezing out the alpha. They're people, right, who are DeFi native and like they want to go put their money to work. They don't come back, right? They don't check the chain every day. They don't have a dashboard on their desk giving them real-time interest rate feeds, right? And that's just like a little bit different than what you see in TradFi, where it's their full-time job to manage his positions. So I think that's part of it. And then also it's just small, right? Like it feels big, but like if you look at, bond markets in TradFi, they're, 1,000x, 1,000,000x what we see in DeFi. So that also is always going to make it slightly less efficient.
So is that basically saying it's dumb money? Like, just as by way of example here, like I'm just always marveling this because like on the curve lending market, here's wrapped Ethereum market where you could either get 16% or 4%. It's like, why are people still there at 16%? Right? I don't know.
Yeah, it's hard to say. I don't know if I would say it's dumb money, but I think it's just not this. It's not actively managed at the same pace. And we saw this happen when we would deprecate old FraxLend pairs. Basically, there's no way to really stop it. It's immutable code. Like you can't, But what ends up happening is like those markets just like become dead, and so that can spike the interest rate. And like we had the interest rate eventually go to like 200, 2,000% on this really old pair, and there were still people in it, right? So I think it's sort of set it and forget it. But I also think it's a little bit more than that too, which is if you think about crypto, right? Like you can make 10% in a day. And so I think what happens is the mind share, if you're a degen or you're on chain, right? You have to choose where to spend your time every day. You're probably going to do it in markets that are much more volatile than maybe a lending market. A few percentage points doesn't make a big difference to you because you're out here hunting meme coins or getting double-digit APYs by getting somewhere first. And so I think that can also have an effect. Uh-oh, I think I lost you.
Maybe it froze.
Oh, I'm still here. Okay. I thought my internet was.
We're here. So I thought that Garrett was waiting. I wanted to ask you this then. What made you actually decide to change? Because, like you said, I think it's a very bold move.
Yeah.
You're in like a very promising startup tech company. You do something with a great team, with a vision. Like, obviously, it had to have been like a huge opportunity or a huge like feeling of mission that you had to really go off like for a new venture. So maybe you can share a bit about that process.
Yeah. Honestly, it was really, look, I think like it's pretty clear to most observers that stablecoins have product market fit, right? And with the partners that we have, like I think we have a real shot at breaking into this market, right? The barriers to entry are very high, but ultimately, like it's very clear that this product wins. But really, why I decided to leave was like the opportunity to build a world-class engineering organization from the ground up. I think, I came up kind of in finance where I think fear keeps everybody running like a very smooth machine, and it's incredible to work in an environment where everybody is obsessed with perfection. It's very nice. And I went to tech. And I remember the first time my boss told me I had to leave my computer at work, being really confused because so at ADP we deal with a lot of sensitive information. We're not allowed to take our computers home. Okay, and it was like 6 o'clock. He was leaving. He's like, "Yeah, like leave your computer here. You can't take it home." And I remember thinking like it was so odd because he didn't have my cell phone number, and I couldn't check my email on my personal phone. So essentially, what he was saying is like, I have no need to get into a hold of you until you come into work tomorrow, which is obviously a bit different than how it is in finance. I think ADP's culture was a little bit too lax personally, but anyway, I've sort of been obsessed ever since then with this kind of how do you build organizations that people love to work at and that build really good products. And I think I took a lot of learnings away from Frax, my time at ADP, where I led the performance and scaling team. And so, the opportunity to take all of that and into a place where if we build something great and we, are aligned that we will be successful, and the opportunity to do that was just like too hard to pass up. And so that was part of it. The other part was just, Nick, my co-founder, is incredible and just someone who really drives towards the goal. And I felt like, there was a moment in time where I felt like this was going to happen with or without me, and I wanted to make sure I was on the train. So I think it was, those two things together, which really made me possible to leave. Although it did take me a few months to come to that conclusion, I will say.
Yeah, and Nick has very also like significant history in this entire space, like as an investor. This, I believe, is his first time making the jump to entrepreneurship. So like, like I know that for some people that's great, like they have a ton of VC experience and like they're able to translate that, and some people have more like growing pains.
So I would say honestly, no. I would be very skeptical of any VC who says that they know how to operate, and I was when I first met Nick as well. And that was partially from my own experience, right? I literally left from private equity, the buy side, to being an operator, and I made a lot of mistakes. But no, Nick is like completely the opposite of what you would sort of expect. He's extremely humble. He's really thoughtful, and also I think the most important thing is that he knows where his expertise stop and where he needs to get advice. I think I've worked with a lot of early stage startups. A lot of founders are a little bit psychotic. They think they're sort of God's gift to the world, and Nick is sort of the exact opposite, right? He knows what he's good at, he knows what his role is, and he knows when we need to find the expertise outside. And he's super thoughtful about taking advice from people. He's not one of these like, I'm the smartest guy in the room. And I think this, and I bring this up mainly because it's incredibly important, I think, and it was the reason why I made the jump, because I was very skeptical of someone kind of coming from VC only experience into an operator role. But he's been like fantastic. And I'll also just give a shout out to our other co-founder, Joe McGrady, who was the head of ops at Galaxy for a long time. He's also fantastic, and we've got a great team.
So yeah, and I can attest that all the people you're mentioning are super smart. I got a chance to see Nick's interview with the Block, so I've heard from him the pitch for Agora. What's your pitch for Agora? Why does the world need another stablecoin? Yeah,
I mean, look, the truth is Tether and Circle have moved the industry forward in a major way, but I think that they make too much money. And they essentially treat people maybe worse than banks, right? Like take your capital, they make a bunch of money on it, and they give you nothing back. And I think part of that is regulatory, but it doesn't have to be that way. And ultimately, if you believe in sort of efficient markets, like it shouldn't be that way. I think you saw something similar play out with mutual funds in the 80s. The mutual index funds were basically taking like 2% and a portion of the profits, and today they're taking a few bips, in ETF products, right? And I think that we very much believe that this industry needs the same kind of change. It hasn't happened because the barriers to entry are incredibly high, right? You have a huge cold start problem. You see this with PYUSD, with USDM, with all these other stablecoin products. It's very difficult to get started. And I think also it is also a industry that looks really simple from the outside. I see a lot of people, they come to me, they're like, oh, I want to start a stablecoin, blah, 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 blah. And I read the deck and I'm like, this is not going to work for what I would argue are obvious reasons. But I think it's a bit of a difficult game to play. And so I think the incumbents feel really good in their positions, and they don't feel like they need to compete. And we're here to kind of change that. I think our view is stablecoins are like the money layer, and they should be run essentially as a public good. So for us, what that means is we make a commitment to pay out as much of our revenue back to the ecosystem and back to people who provide services which make the monetary network more valuable. So this could be exchanges, it could be dApps, merchants who accept it, right? Anybody who sort of we can KYC and who's providing value in the network, we want to pay you essentially. And so, there's a lot of talk about yield bearing stablecoins, and those are great products, but I think in a competitive environment, which this is, it's a poor allocation of resources, right? And so what I basically mean is like in the same way that makers and takers don't pay the same fees on an exchange, not everybody probably deserves to get the same payout, right? And so depending on how much value you're bringing, you deserve more or less. And so I think there are people in a money network, which some of them take value and some of them make value. And if you're a maker, you deserve to get paid.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Now, I'll move on to the tech side. Quick question from Amadeo Brands, who is from our sponsor at YieldNest. So a reminder that Leviathan News is sponsored by YieldNest. Check them out on X at YieldNestFi. Will Agora Finance be fully Frax aligned, or will it be creating a lot of the components from scratch?
I think we're fully Frax aligned. We love Frax. We love pretty much all decentralized stablecoins. I think we view them very much as our best customers. And obviously, I'm still very close with everyone at Frax. They're really great partners of ours. They're going to be handling a bunch of services for us. I think they were one of the first teams to mint AUSD as well. And so I would say fully Frax aligned. Also, we create everything from scratch at Agora. We don't ever plan to do anything more than this, more than stablecoins. And I think that's also a key thing sorry, I don't mean to say nothing besides this, but one of our really strong things that we believe is that vertical integration, right? Essentially competing with your customers is just a terrible strategy in markets where there's network effects, right? We talk to a lot of exchanges, and it's not lost on them that every USDC that sits on their exchange is funding Coinbase, whom in many cases is their largest competitor, right? And if you're an L2, it's funding Base. And if you're, I think for us, we don't plan to kind of go the Frax route where we have all of these kind of horizontal scaling. For us, it's much more about let's build the best stablecoin that's the most credibly neutral, that is, giving back as much as we can, and let's win that game and change the industry in the process.
Robo Odin asks, focused or on-chain user focused?
I think that depending on how you think about that question, it's sort of a little bit of both. I think it's for us, we only directly interact with large institutions who we can KYC and are sort of moving, millions of dollars at a time. But obviously, stablecoins are used by lots of different people, right? And so I think that's not lost on us. And so a big part of what we believe is, and what we do, is we work with dApps to pay them for services and for listing and everything else. And so it becomes, these vendors, service providers for us, they list AUSD, they market AUSD, and now they have a source of revenue for all the AUSD that they're driving. And so I think if we think about some of the other stablecoins that have launched, I think they made the mistake of what I call an anemic launch, where they're okay, we're going to launch the coin and then it'll just sort of grow. And I think they make the mistake of not recognizing that the industry is much more mature than it was 5 years ago. And so that strategy doesn't work. You have to show up on day one with places to use the token, data feeds, deep liquidity, which you're going to have to pay for. And you're going to have to do a lot of work to get integrated across payment providers, merchants, all this other stuff. So I think we're sort of very, we don't interact with retail customers. We don't market to retail people. We're 100% sort of institutional, and also I'll just say non-US institutional focus. So those are the only people that have a direct relationship with us. But we recognize that this is a global product, right? And you need use cases beyond just the sort of stablecoin to be successful.
So, Drake, what are some of the main benefits that you guys offer institutions? Why is it a good decision by them to take their capital to Agora?
Yeah, so I think that is not really a question we try too hard to answer. What we want to build is a stablecoin that has the deepest liquidity, the most use cases, and is credibly neutral, right? And so we believe if you build a better product, people will just come to it. At the same time, we should be really clear that there's not a lot of differentiation for users, right? Vanilla users with USDC, USDT, Agora, whatever. And so I think for us, we build a better sort of ecosystem that's aligned with all of the players and you sort of win the war on liquidity, use cases, and alignment.
And one thing I'll bring up is that you did choose to launch on L1, and we kind of forget it now because we're in like maybe a DeFi autumn or winter or spring or who knows what season. But gas is cheap, but gas will be expensive at some point. And you have done an amazing job. This is actually where Agora first got my radar in sort of gas golfing this down to as cheap as can possibly be done on mainnet. I mean, I don't want to say as cheap as can possibly be done because I'm sure there's
probably some micro optimizations.
But it's very good, right? Could you talk us a bit through this? Because you launched this a couple months ago, and there's a ton of work that went into this. Talk us, assuming like an intermediate technical background for the audience, like talk us through this thread.
Yeah, so I think like it's funny because even for a lot of these other chains that have like cheaper gas prices, right? I mean, look, Ethereum was cheap for a long, long time. So it really has to do with like congestion, right? More than it does anything else. And I think I've been in crypto, building in crypto for the last 5 years, and every time a new stablecoin comes out, it just feels like such a missed opportunity to write good code and to it's because these people are not crypto people, right? Like PYUSD launched their token with like Solidity version 4. This is the same code as Paxos. Like, Circle, it has actually made some improvements recently, and probably the best. And I just felt like it was so clear that like these are just not crypto people. These weren't Solidity developers. Like these were just, and there was so much missed opportunity for not just less gas, but just like a better product and just like a signal to people that like you care about everything. And so that's kind of like what inspired me on this. And I always thought like there were a few key missed opportunities here that I felt like always existed for stablecoins. One is like the fact that like the proxy pattern and the requirements for upgrades like adds gas unnecessarily. And so, one thing, so there's like that piece, and like the proxy pattern and the tweaks you can make there is one way we've saved gas. And I'll just give a preview of my next Twitter thread. But basically, the proxy pattern consists of the following. You have a proxy, which forwards requests essentially to an implementation contract, which then does the code execution, right? And the reason that stablecoins have to do this is that you have to be upgradable. Just for regulatory reasons, you can't risk being forced into a migration. So we sort of are dealing with this like forced upgradability. And so, but at the same time, you pay the price of now forwarding that information, right? And I always thought like, well, why not just build the first version of the implementation in the proxy? And then if you need to upgrade later, you always can forward it on to the thing, and that's fine. But like, Tether's never upgraded. They have an immutable smart contract. Circle has done upgrades only because like they didn't do a good job the first time. And so I think like that was like one thing we did. So the first thing is like all the transfer functions are implemented directly on the proxy. They still retain the ability to be upgraded if we run into some, huge regulatory change and we have to upgrade, then fine. But for now, so like that was a huge gas savings there. And I always felt like was really low hanging fruit and kind of obvious, but have never seen anyone do it. So that's like the first thing. And then also it's just classic gas golfing, right? So if you think about the most expensive opcodes, which are basically like the byte code, it's storing data in storage, reading that data, and essentially calling external contracts. I would argue are like the most important things. One caveat I will just say to all of this is that I don't focus on gas improvements that are less than 100 gas. So just for context, like a typical ERC transfer is like 40,000 gas or something. There are a lot more things that we could have done in this contract to save 5, 6, 8, 10 gas, but it comes at the cost of complexity. And this is a really important thing that I believe like deep in my soul, which is that complexity is sort of the enemy of security. Everything you write should be really, really simple as possible, super easy to read for auditors, especially. I obsess about this. And easy to reason about, easy to logic. And so when you start to get into these situations where you're writing big blocks of assembly and everything else, like it's not only is it more complexity, but it becomes difficult for you to get people to understand and audit your code, right? So there's probably some more work you could do here, but I would say it's pretty down to 100. Anything that costs you 100 gas or more has been optimized. And so most of the way we did this was through essentially the like packing storage slots. So if you think about like what's required, basically I like made a list of like what's required, and okay, what can we pack together? And by doing that, you can reduce a lot of the information that you're reading. Well, yeah, I guess like the first step is, okay, wait, do I actually have to do all of this? And so if you look at USDT and USDC, they have like a message sender check on the blacklist, which arguably is unnecessary, just completely. Like if you think about it, it doesn't make any sense. It's funds you want to freeze, not accounts, right? And so like that one we just got rid of completely. And then we did a bunch of other little tricks to kind of consolidate those storage reads to make it as optimum as possible. And so I can go into more detail, but that's sort of like the short story. And then the very last thing that I'll just note is we also mined a Vanity address. So if you look at the contract address, starts with 8 zeros and it ends with Agora. It spells Agora, the last 6 digits. And that was no easy feat. So basically, the way you do this is actually pretty cool, which I'm going to write a thread about this too. So some alpha. We've heard of like this create to pattern. There's a create to opcode, which essentially generates addresses based on the message sender and the bytecode. But there's a new thing called create 3, which is essentially I can deploy any bytecode from the right sender and it'll be posted to this address. And so I used that sort of logic. I rented like 150 GPUs and was guessing essentially like, I think each GPU is doing like 5 billion guesses per second. Yeah, we were able to find 14 digits, which is quite a lot to mine for a Vanity address. But that'll save users some gas, and also it's nice that it spells Agora. So
yeah,
that's another gas solving thing people don't understand. Like actually, if you have more zeros in the front of your address, it's cheaper to execute transactions.
I caught the zeros thing. I didn't catch the Agora. That's really cool. Then you also like at the moment it supports a lot more ERCs than a lot of other stablecoins, right?
Yeah. So actually, I think as far as I know, Circle has the same ERCs here. So this is actually pretty cool. So most people are familiar with ERC 2612, which is permit. But there's a new one that's like almost finalized, ERC 3009, which is essentially transfers with a signature. So permit, 2612 is approvals with a signature. This is the whole transfer themselves. And so we wanted to make sure we at least had feature parity with USDC, and the Agora contract is a drop-in replacement for USDC. Because that's actually something that a lot of teams also underestimate when they launch new products is if you write your own interface, the costs to incorporating you into things is very high. And I know of a few dexes who decided to change from the interface of Uniswap, and now it takes months to get integrated with 1inch and everything else. So we wanted it to be a drop-in replacement for USDC, and wanted to enable kind of the next wave of gas abstracted transfers. And so I think 3009 is going to catch on, but we'll see. And because Tether is immutable, they can't upgrade, so they're sort of stuck forever, unfortunately.
I was on mute there. Sorry. Very cool stuff. I'd urge people to check that out. Amazing that we got right now 600 people watching this on X to just watch us walk through like technical deep dive on a GitHub repo. Shout out to all 600 nerds watching on X. Glad to have you all. Make sure to share, repost this, get this. Let's get this over 600,000.
Follow me on Twitter.
Yeah, absolutely. Follow Drake. If you're not following Drake, who are you following and why?
Exactly. We're posting a lot of stuff.
Yeah, seriously. So that's just Drake Evans V1, and it's a great time for someone to squat Drake Evans V2. Go ahead and front run that.
By
the way, guys,
I'm trying to get Drake Evans. It's a dead account, and I can't. So,
just a side comment, guys. I don't know if you mentioned it or do you know it. But you know what Agora in Hebrew is? What does it mean? It's a penny. Like that's how we say pennies. Like our penny. Like 100 agoras are 1 shekel.
Nice. It's funny. Agora is actually a word that let's hope we don't. Let's not foreshadow anything. But Agora is actually a word that means a lot of things in different languages. So The original inspiration was actually in Greek. Agora means like a meeting place. It's like the city square where, philosophers exchange ideas.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like we kind of like that as an homage to kind of our vision, which is like we wanted to create a neutral layer for anyone to use, as opposed to kind of some of the more, I talked about vertical integration from some competitors and kind of like viewing the stablecoin as like a rent-seeking value extraction layer, and we sort of always felt like it shouldn't be that. It should be something universal. Come one, come all, and we're all sort of equals in the Agora, and everyone's equal sort of on the blockchain.
And here we got some
Yeah,
aerial shot of the original Greek Agora in Athens.
Right.
Question from Amadeo, and for those of you just joining us, Amadeo's with YieldNest, the sponsor of Leviathan News. So make sure to check out YieldNest FI. Will the freeze function be removed, or is this needed?
It's 100% required, unfortunately. So look, I mean, anytime you have you're touching banks or fiat or any of the traditional finance rails, you have to keep them happy. And I think being debanked is the biggest risk to any stablecoin. And so for us, the ability, we can't be in a situation where someone's using our token to fund terrorism, to whatever, OFAC sanction, et cetera. And so we have to have a way to freeze addresses, which reminds me, I probably need to double check that I've frozen all the OFAC addresses already. but yeah, unfortunately it has to stay. I changed this from blacklist to freeze, not for any, like someone asked me this, like any, politically correct. I know blacklist is sort of falling out of favor, but mainly because it's language that regulators speak, right? So for them, like freezing assets is a very important thing, sort of freeze and seize. And so for us, our view here is like keeping our access to banks and everything is really important, and it's the only way we'll be successful. So yeah, unfortunately, the freeze is here to stay.
Yeah, I think it's actually, I think it's fortunately though in these cases, because we actually mentioned it on the panel yesterday, because like if we really want to onboard like the actual money out there, like they're gonna demand it. That's the game they play. Unless we play it, they're not gonna come. And the only way is to like lure them slowly into moving to decentralized rails, but like they will never bring their quadrillions unless we do this kind of stuff. So I think that that's a good thing about smart contracts, that they allow. And like if you don't want to hold this stablecoin or the other, like because they have like a freeze function, don't do it.
Don't do it. Yeah, and I think I very much agree, where it's like we let people build on top of us, and they can rehypothecate, they can do all these amazing things. Like our job is very, very narrow. And it's to be the bridge between, literally US dollars and on-chain. And I don't feel the need to build something that's all of this, right? Let other people build the next piece, the next piece, the next piece. What I'm building is a credibly neutral digital dollar that's fully backed, that is run as a public good. If you want to build censorship resistance, if you want to build all sorts of cool shit, that's great. It's super composable. You can, absorb, you can use the contracts, they're permissionless. And I've never felt the need to be more than what I felt like we were supposed to be.
Yeah, I'm a bit curious to hear how Agora actually does plan on kind of safely keeping funds, because we all remember USDC had its money in Silicon Valley Bank, and there's that weekend of terror if it was going to depeg. How is Agora going to be managing this? Is it?
Yeah. So we have basically a treasuries. So Van Eck manages a short-dated treasury fund for us. That's the majority, I would say, overnight repos and super short-dated treasuries, less than 7 days. The yield curve's inverted, or at least it was last time I checked. So there's really no reason to hold anything of higher duration. And I think, we're lucky. I don't want to shit on other stablecoin issuers too much, just because, like, here's the truth, right? Like Tether, USDC have moved this industry forward in a huge way. We're standing on the shoulders of giants, right? But we can also learn from their mistakes, right? So, or their successes. I think the CEO of Cantor Fitzgerald talked about, redeeming 10 billion in 2 days, a few years ago. And I listened to all of Paolo's interviews and podcasts, and there's a lot of interesting stuff about how quickly you have to be able to redeem. And then you look at Circle, who, and I would say historically, Tether's taken this very opaque position, right? We don't advertise what we're doing and just deal with it. Circle took the opposite, which is like, hey, we're super transparent. In fact, here's all the banks and how much money we have at each of them. And I think the truth is probably that when you're building something that's relying on fractional reserve banking, you probably can't be as, or I would argue that the way USDC was so transparent about where they were holding reserves was part of the problem for them. Obviously, the comms they had around like the Friday night announcement was also terrible. Like moving into the weekend when you know you don't have liquidity, like I don't know, that was not a great look. And then also like, look, let's be honest, right? Like choosing which banks to custody is also hugely important where you're going to keep your cash. So for us, like we only use systemically important banks. State Street's our cash custodian, and VanEck is managing the short-dated treasury funds. So short-dated treasuries are and overnight repos are arguably the most liquid financial instrument that exists. So we feel really safe. And then I'll just also add that like we keep that in bankruptcy remote trust. So there's no possible way for any malfeasance at Agora to affect AUSD holders. So and this is actually a stronger structure than some other stablecoins employ in terms of bankruptcy remoteness. There's sort of a whole ladder of things that are bankruptcy remote, but the case law, the strength of the organization, all those things like is different. And I think having a trust, in the U.S. Is probably the most secure way to possibly segregate funds, which is what we do.
Got it. What's your take on the overall stablecoin market at the moment? Because like we saw like after 2022, we saw the peak, Do Kwon shenanigans, Terra falls apart, like the entire stablecoin market collapses, but it's rebounded a bit lately. Although the rebound's been kind of strange because it doesn't feel like we're in DeFi summer at the moment, right? Like a lot of like the stablecoins are flowing to other chains. Tron is like seeing a huge amount of Tether flowing there. So it's like the stablecoins are kind of flowing, but it's not kickstarting DeFi summer. So what's your like take on the market here and the stablecoins and the whole little?
I think there's kind of three big trends that I feel like are happening. You have like the digital cash, fiat coin, kind of USDT, USDC. And I would say USDT is blowing everyone out of the water there, right? In terms of just like actual peer-to-peer cash, sort of the Satoshi's vision kind of thing. Like Tether is blowing it out of the water, right? And they're using Tron, cheap blockchains to kind of just really enable people to have their own checking account on chain. That's like one piece that I think is happening, and that trend is growing, and it's the most important one I think for companies like Agora. Then you sort of have, I would say, like this decentralized stablecoin where you've got Maker moving into this whole new era, Frax sort of sticking with what's been working, and I think you're seeing a consolidation there too. I have been building Agora for the last 6-8 months or so, so I'm a little bit less in tune with everything that's happening there, but I feel like there's been a bit of a consolidation in the sort of like just traditional decentralized stablecoin. And there's also this huge shift to paying out yield. I think this is a huge lesson. I feel like a lot of, if you're thinking about launching a stablecoin, here's the number one lesson that people fuck up is you need to have reasons for people to hold your coin. You must have a reason. So everyone thinks that they're going to be like DAI, but DAI launched in a market where there was no stablecoin. There was a bunch of pent up demand, which they met. So it was great. You create the debt-backed stablecoin, that creates sell pressure, but there's a whole bunch of people who wanted a stablecoin. Perfect. Then you look at other people. Tether just launched Alloy, which I think is going to be running into these same problems. Aave launched Go, and these things depegged. Why? Because there's no buyers, right? You have a bunch of people who want to sell them for leverage, right? Because they want to lever up on ETH or other volatile assets. So they sell them, create downward pressure. Who's going to buy it, right? If you don't have that, so I think smart stablecoins like Maker, like Frax, introduced staked DAI, staked Frax to sort of balance out the supply and demand mechanics, right? Where you have all this demand for leverage, but you need to have demand to hold. And now that rates are high, I think you're seeing a lot of pretty much every stablecoin now is like introducing staking. So I think that's like a big trend that's moving forward. And then I would say like the next thing, which is arguably the most interesting, is this kind of like financial products wrapped in a stablecoin, which is sort of how I describe Athena. And I think it's incredibly fascinating, and it's very much tailor-made for on-chain market making. So if you think about a stablecoin, and we can talk about USDE, for example. When demand for USDE rises, in a typical asset, the price rises. But on a stablecoin, the market cap expands, right? And so, and when demand moves out, instead of the price moving, you have a market cap contract. And this is an incredibly useful dynamic for providing passive liquidity, right? Because it's simply much easier to market make USDE as a stablecoin than it is to try to market it as a volatile play on the basis trade, right? And so now you can get deep stablecoin liquidity. You can use a stable swap. You can go to Curve and earn rewards. You can do all this stuff that is really hard to do with a volatile token, right? You have to be actively market making. You're going to get your lunch eaten, and then you've got to pay for mercenary liquidity. It's really hard, as opposed to now, like with USDE, the way they've hedged a certain portion of it, the way it works, like it makes it a lot easier for people to drive liquidity. And look, liquidity is the lifeblood of on-chain finance, right? It's the most important thing that you do. So I actually think that's maybe the most interesting trend. But those are my brief thoughts on sort of the three things that we all call stablecoins.
Very cool, very cool. What is so? I was listening to that podcast I mentioned, and one of the knocks against Tether, again, like we're big fans of Tether and USDC, of course. What was like their need to kind of take money from somewhere to be able to pay for on-chain liquidity? What's the like strategy, if any, for Agora to like manage on-chain liquidity?
Yeah, I mean, so first of all, I mean, look, Frax is arguably the best at driving deep on-chain liquidity, and so having spent the last 2 years there, incredibly lucky to have learned from the best. But look, I think ultimately it's you have to really think deeply about the mindset of LPs. You need to think about the mindset of users and sort of how do you create an environment that's self-sustaining. So in the beginning, look, you have to pay for liquidity, right? This is the way it works, and so that's what we're engaging, people to help us drive liquidity incentives. And then I think, but like really in the long run, you need use cases, right? Like this is it, right? Like you can't pay for liquidity forever. Not that we pay directly for liquidity, just to be clear, but incentives and points and whatever else you may figure out, like it just doesn't last. So for us, I mean, our biggest thing is we pay people to market, to drive liquidity, to drive adoption, and then also we're 100% focused on use cases, right? So we've got like a list of 60 dApps waiting to integrate us, and I think this is the thing that PYUSD really messed up. Was they came in and they thought, hey, we're PayPal, we'll just launch a token and it'll grow sort of organically because the market's going to 10x. And I think they realized that wasn't going to work. So they engaged some folks to kind of drive some liquidity incentives, get some liquidity, and then that's great. But then where do you use PYUSD, and why would you use PYUSD over something else? And so you end up you end up in the really tough spot of being sort of thought of as like this anemic stablecoin, right? That like doesn't actually do anything. And so I think for us, so the short answer is we are doing kind of all the traditional stuff, but we're very, very focused on making sure that we have legitimate organic volume, because that's what keeps market makers there, right? You can't incentivize or points or market your way to deep liquidity if there's no volume. So we're very aware of that and working hard to bring a lot of use cases and utility, right? Like that's why people choose a stablecoin, because they can use it and they can get in and out of it with low slippage. So,
well, if you haven't engaged with Martin from Curve yet already, I would recommend you keep him on your short list as you figure out on-chain use cases.
Yeah.
When you talk about use cases, I assume you guys mostly mean vaults and yields and stuff like that, or do you also mean like real world use case? Like I don't know, like actually.
I think it's both, right? So it's for us, like initially, our main focus is getting listed in as many dApps as we possibly can. And we pay those dApps, right? Also, so like this is a source of revenue for them. Like they're very incentivized. Our incentives are perfectly aligned for them to drive volume to, the AUSD pairs or the AUSD use cases on their platform. And like we never expect anyone to be giving us exclusive rights or anything like that. But like, look, we say, hey, if you help us grow, we pay you, basically, right? And so I think, and the more places you have that you can use AUSD, naturally that creates volume because people are moving around DeFi, they're doing this, that, and the other. And so I think for us, like it's just as many. And if you're a DApp that we haven't reached out to, you should reach out to us. We would love to get you onboarded and pay you. So, but yeah, I mean, that's kind of like the way we think about it. It's use cases across DeFi and then outside of DeFi, right? So if you're running a neobank, if you're a payment processor, if you're whatever, and we haven't reached out to you, you should reach out to us because we would love to pay you to incorporate AUSD.
Yeah, we got a question from Robo Odin asking if Agora is going to explore non-USD backed stables.
This is a complicated question. And I think it's something that a lot of people ask about, but okay, the short story is yes, we would do that. I think I'm very much a US dollar maxi. I think any talk about losing reserve currency status is coming from left field and probably not true. So again, like I understand that's a bit of a biased opinion, but look, I think the truth is we just haven't seen a lot of demand for anything else. A little bit for euros potentially, but yeah, so I think like it's on our radar. We sort of built all of our infrastructure in house, assuming that we're going to have multiple products and other products. But I think we're really focused at this stage on just building the best US dollar stablecoin that we can possibly build, and we don't want to get distracted by things that we haven't seen that there's real demand for. If you look at Euro C or what's the other one, Angle, like they and actually I love the Angle guys. They're a great team as well. But you know, like look, even they, you know, pivoted to the US dollar stablecoin stuff, and I think like we just haven't seen the adoption to make it make sense yet. And I would argue too that there's kind of you know, one thing that I think people sometimes in crypto miss, especially in more developed countries, is that your financial system is pretty good already. And so they're like, well, what's the point of stablecoins? I'd be much more interested in a stablecoin that represents emerging markets, because those are the places where the financial system isn't so robust and where an alternative that you have a bit more control over is actually useful, right? The hard part is those people usually just want dollars. But I think like, you know, like a Euro stablecoin, I just don't ever see it taking off because within the Euro block, you have your bank account, you can send money instantly. It's a pretty good system. And then outside of it is their demand for euros, right? I don't think so much, but because yeah, like I don't really think of a Euro stablecoin, and I would love to be, you know, tag me on Twitter if you think I'm wrong here, but you know, I just don't see a quality of life upgrade for Europeans to use a stablecoin over just their phone or whatever else they're using already. And so I think same thing for dollar. I say this a lot. Like I don't ever envision a world where Americans are using AUSD that much. To be perfectly frank, my Visa card, Bank of America, is pretty good for 99% of people. And you know, I have a lot of complaints with the banking system, and I wish it was different. But I have to also be honest that like most users don't care. They like their Visa card. They like the Bank of America account. So yeah.
It's more of a question of what's gonna start happening like backstage, no? Because I agree, like for the consumer, like who cares? Like they want to go and buy stuff.
Yeah.
But I can only imagine that, I don't know, in like a decade or 2 decades from now, a lot of the like what happens on the back end of things, I personally kind of think that a lot of the infrastructure will go the stablecoin way, right?
Okay, so here's my take on this. You know, people talk about, oh, CBDC, blah blah blah, electronic cash. Like it's already electronic. Newsflash for everybody. When you send money, when you send $1 billion from Bank of America, JP Morgan, it's electronic. It's bits already. If they wanted it to be instant, they could make it instant. Like it's already possible, and it's by design not that way. So I think some people are saying, well, wait a minute, we have this shitty ledger system. It's a bunch of, you know, computers, and it takes a day to do this, that, and the other. If they wanted to make settlement times faster, they could. Blockchain is a great way to do that. But here's the truth. The Fed already knows where every single dollar is. They purposely choose not to know about retail. They just know about what bank it's at. And they've pushed all of that regulatory stuff to the banks because the banks can violate your rights without a court order, whereas a government can't. I think it's a very, I think it's a very purposeful design as it is today. And so I don't know if I believe that stablecoins will like replace the ledger that, at least not public stablecoins, right? I think like blockchain is a wholesale upgrade to whatever they're using today. And if they want to incorporate it, they can. But I don't think it'll ever be like public stablecoins. But I don't ever think that like banks will be settling with the same thing that we're settling as regular users, is I guess kind of what I'm saying. In the same way that like, even today, that's sort of true, right? Unless you're using actual cash, you're mainly settling in commercial paper, right? You have your Visa card, which is like an IOU for some dollars between banks. That's different than having a Fed Master account, right? So there's sort of 2 tiers of money already, and I think there will be public stablecoins, but I don't know if ever like the same stablecoin I hold in my wallet is the same thing that JP Morgan is using to settle with Bank of America. I don't know. I don't see it happening. I know that's a controversial.
As Robo1 points out, we don't pitch only softballs here. Leviathan News for all your hard-hitting journalism, and that's probably why we have over 800 viewers on X, which is great, but still rookie numbers. So please, while we're about an hour into the show, let's retweet this, share this with your friends. Let's get this over 8 million. Come on, let's really shoot for the stars here. No, I know that you actually have to go pretty soon, but I'm curious to know, so we talked a bit about Tether. Like USDC is super focused on now, like the base chain, right? Because they have their own native chain. Do you have any at all L2 plans, for pushing Agora onto L2s, or no? Just focus strictly on L1.
We think it's a bad idea. Look, never say never, but it's funny because you raise money, all the VCs want to know the same thing. They want the token warrants, all that stuff. But here's the truth. We view it as a bad play. We want to be credibly neutral, right? We don't want to take bets on this L2 or that L2 as a way to juice our bottom line. Our view is we want to build the best stablecoin that exists. And to do that, you have to be credibly neutral. You can't compete with your customers. And I think it's an incredible amount of hubris to think that you can, especially in an industry where the switching costs are so low. It's so easy to switch from USDC to AUSD, compared to something like a bank, right? Where if your bank is hosing you, you got to go KYC, get a new bank account set up, fund it. It takes a few days. The switching costs are so low. And I think, our view is very much we will never compete with our customers. We want to build the best money layer, and that's it.
Got it. But presumably it'll be able to be bridged to.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah. So we're already actually launched on Avalanche. We haven't really publicized that yet, but we deploy the contract to Avalanche. We're going to come to Fraxel, Mantle, Sui is in the pipeline. All these. So 100%. We want to be on the cheap chains and everywhere, but we'll never kind of build our own. Our view is it's just it's the wrong mindset. I think sort of rent-seeking, value extraction, and throwing around your market position to kind of extract value is just not the way. We don't think first of all, I don't think it's a good strategy in the long run, but also it's just not what we want to do.
All right, so that's some good light alpha. But for those 800 people who are tuned in, what heavy alpha can you drop? What's something that you can tell us about Agora that hasn't hit anywhere else?
Oh man, I don't even know. We're pretty. I already dropped kind of all the chains we're about to launch on. That's probably the biggest one. Coming to Sui soon. We're in audits now. Coming to Mantle, Fraxel, Alpha. Yeah, the thing is, it's kind of a boring business to in some extent. So I don't know if there's too much alpha. We're hoping to get a chain.
It's probably the kind of alpha you can't share, because I can only imagine what's going on through your head. Oh my God, we're talking to this institution and that institution and these guys. That guys.
Look,
but I can relate.
We're a little. Yeah, it's true. 100%. We're cognizant very much of keeping everyone happy, especially our most important partners, and part of that means not saying their names. So
exactly, it's being a grown up, playing the big leagues.
Yeah, and crypto still has a very weird reputation, and so we're doing a lot of lobbying. Lobbying, not actual lobbying. I wish we had enough money to do that, but trying to. I spoke in DC a few weeks ago. We've outreached as much as we can to kind of really show the benefits of US dollar stablecoins to the government and to commerce and innovation, and this isn't something that cannibalizes existing financial infrastructure. It's something that gets dollars into the hands of 1 billion new users, which is great. And obviously there's some controversy about reserve currencies and everything else, but to regulators, to lawmakers, we really make the pitch hard that it's a net positive.
Yeah. You briefly mentioned audits. I was looking, though, I didn't see the audits. Is that something you're going to be publishing, any audits you've had?
Yeah, I'll tell you. So we did a audit midway through, kind of an active, while the code base was still active, with Trust. Great team, love them a lot. And then we did 2 audits, one with Spearbit DAO, 0 highs, 0 criticals, and we just finished one with Sertora. Same thing. So they found one critical in a not part of the stablecoin itself, some other code, but yeah. So I've always sort of been of the opinion that when you go to audits, you should not be getting any highs or criticals. Like they shouldn't be finding anything. That's the way it's supposed to go. So anyway, we have 2 clean audits on the stablecoin, and we'll publish those soon. Once I got them back, I was like, okay, great, everything's clean. I feel good. We can deploy. But yeah. And both those teams, Spearbit, Sertora, absolutely fantastic, by the way, and Trust as well.
And just briefly, like I was taking a look at the actual smart contract on Etherscan here, and there's $40 million that's been deployed to, mostly this OX52 address. Like, but what's the deployment that's gone on so far to date? Like, what is this initial money?
So it's 2 of our big partners, 3 maybe. I'm not sure. So I'll be honest, this is a little bit more on the BD side of like who's been minting. I can tell you Frax is one of them. The other ones, I don't know. I would say large institutions that you've heard of before. But other than that, I don't know if I should. It's probably. I'm sure the on-chain sleuths will figure it out. But
all right.
But yeah, so some of our first like really good partners kind of came through to kind of do the first mints. Frax being one of them, and a few others as well. So
it sounds like a mystery for which people will want to follow Agora Finance to be able to see how.
Absolutely. Follow us. Follow me on Twitter, Drake Evans Z1. Follow Agora. It's with AUSD. Yeah.
Excellent. Anything else to plug, or should we let you get on your way?
I think that's it. Just follow us on Twitter. We're going to be doing a lot of stuff and changing the industry. So keep your eye out.
Excellent. And while you're at it, make sure to follow Leviathan News so you can keep up with all the latest on potential Leviathan News mints, the Squid token, all of our action on our Telegram news feed, as well as on YouTube, Spotify, X, everywhere you like to be. We like to be as well. This has been another Llama Party. Today's